My name is Mike Garlia.
And I'm Steve Jones.
When Steps, the Backstreet Boys, and Westlife dominated the pop charts, we decided to write a script.
Based on our experiences as holiday entertainers.
It's sat in an attic for the last 16 years. How terrible is the writing? How awful will the acting be?
Only you can help us decide.
This is Bad Scripts.
It's time again for another special episode of Bad Scripts. I'm joined, as always, by the ultimately provocative Mike Garlia. Hi, Mike. How are you doing today?
Hi, Steve. And provocative. What makes me provocative?
Ultimately provocative. I think.
Ultimately, what is that? What is that?
I think it's because we always debate. It's always friendly and it's always fun, but we always have a debate. There'll always be two sides to it that I think we throw in to our conversations that might not even be our own opinion, but we like to play devil's advocate and be provocative with it. So, but I think that works.
I think that's a word to describe. So describe yourself. I'm ultimately provocative. So I don't get to use these monikers on you because you do the introductions most times. So I don't get to say and the amazing or the wonderful or the hairy face Steve Jones. I never really get to say any of this, do I?
True, most of those I will accept graciously. I'm not so sure about the wonderful, but I'll learn to come to terms with that as a descriptor. But there we go. So, Mike, we are at the end of The Last Resort. We had our last episode, the previous one, number 13, and it's time for another one of our special episodes where we deconstruct, digest, review, and giggle a little bit about what we've read, what we've written, and everything else in between. So, Mike, as is standard in this situation, I believe that you're going to do what we've done in the last two specials, and that's you're going to read to us the treatment for episode 3 of Last Resorts that was included in the pack sent off to the television company when we first wrote this.
I certainly am. And in true form as well, because I sense a theme coming through on this one. We ended the last episode rather provocatively. Provocative will be a theme.
100%. If you haven't listened to the very, very end of the last episode, go back. After the credits, we've got our own Marvel-esque post-credit scene. So check that out, and it might give you a little clue as to what's to come within the podcast.
I think that's rather extending that and overselling it. A Marvel-esque with a Nokia 3310 ringtone from 1998.
It could have been Ant-Man. We could have had time. There was a lot of time travel in the most recent Marvel movies. Who's to say that this isn't part of a wider Marvel universe, that Camp Holidays doesn't exist in the ether of Captain America?
I'm pretty sure Marvel will say that themselves when their lawyers catch on to us and give us a cease and desist. Anyway, yes, in true form, I have been the reader of said treatments, and I'm rather happy to go through episode 3, and then to lament on how close we were to actually that through the script itself. So sit tight, and here we go. This is the third and final episode of Last Resort. It is the end of the season, and problems with poor sales and flagging popularity have plagued the company. Management are worried, and Alan arrives with some startling news on both a personal and professional plane. The campcoats, blissfully unaware of this, continue performing their duties, but do begin to question the possibility of their contracts not being renewed for the next season. Relationships are tested, and friendships stretched to the limits as Adam
makes a couple of big mistakes. That's an understatement. Taking his seemingly glossy shine and tainting it slightly. Yes, the word tainting does appear in this. Kelly's up to her usual tricks, one being getting Adam drunk and sleeping with him. Spoiler. Then proceeding to gloat this point in front of Sam. Dan and Donna are happy in each other's arms, and her influence has calmed him immensely. Robin has changed from the frail and girl-like waif we meet in episode 1 to a proud and strong gay man, and an incident with Dan brings the rivals to a surprising union. Vlad and family are up to their usual tricks and manage to turn a barbecue into a full-blown vodka party. Bob tries to stop the proceedings, but is coaxed into joining in, and before you know it, the life and soul of the party. Wayne is given a harsh reality check, but seems to shake off the criticism with unwavering sarcasm. Alan begins to decline into breakdown towards the end of the episode, and his obvious passion for the company shines through his disappointed eyes as Mark is given the prospect of a step up the company ladder. The episode finishes with an end-of-season fancy dress party, where emotions run high and questions are answered, and finally, it's time to see if Sam and Adam will ever get it on. As the management are informed that not only has Alan's right-hand man Kevin run away with the dancer, but also the board has lost patience with the poor figures and has decided to sell the company. Worse still, if a buyer cannot be found before January, then Camp Holidays will close its gates for the last time. This episode shows the change in personality and the growth of character that such a close-knit environment provokes. End of treatment.
Wow. Now, that treatment, I think, was a lot more in-depth than the previous two. We went into a lot more detail about every single character there, don't you think? That felt very
I think we just
involved.
pretty much gave the whole story away. If we'd led with that, there wouldn't be any point listening to the episodes because you just get a sense of what's going on. I think we just literally lay it all out there in paper form.
And just going back to what we talked about, tainted. I'm assuming that that's a...
Well, I mean, it's taking his seemingly glossy shine and tainting it slightly.
Also, were they really contemplating the prospect of not having the contracts renewed? I know we briefly mention it about Kelly.
Mentioned.
Kelly is, there's like, I think Robin says to Kelly, doesn't he? Oh, do you really think you're going to get another year here? And blah. And she's like, I don't want to work in a shithole like this. So I think that's about as close to it as we get. And I think that's the first time the treatment doesn't really reflect the story as well as perhaps the other treatments did for the other two scripts.
The treatment feels like it's been written as exposition. It's just it's setting up a story that you feel is going to follow next, but the whole script is literally going through that story. That's what it kind of feels like to me.
Yeah,
it doesn't really sell it, does it? It doesn't really say there's drama. That lots of stuff is happening, but everything starts to come together.
It didn't feel like the elevator pitch this time. It felt very much like you said, the exposition. It was a synopsis. It wasn't a treatment. So a little bit of criticism for our younger selves there. Thank you for reading that out, Mike, as you did so eloquently today and the previous times we've gone through the treatments. Something that has been said to us by listeners and has been raised by several people. A little bit more about understanding about the script itself, and we talk about very briefly in our intro that we found the script in an attic, but I think it's probably worth us elaborating a little bit more just on how we wrote it and what the steps were, or what happened before it went in the attic and was found, so that people could understand a little bit of the process of how we got from there, the very beginning, to here. Do you want to elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, as far as I recall, I think we started writing this, or at least planning this, in a McDonald's in Salford, taking full advantage of the free refills as it was back then. You pay 69 pence for a coffee and you could drink unlimited. So we literally set up, and I remember we were next to the window. So this was the McDonald's, for anyone who's ever been to Salford or plans to go to Salford. It's the McDonald's closest to the university in a really dodgy part of the city. And I think, as I recall, we were in there most days writing and planning this, but we actually wrote the script in your mum's living room in Nottingham on a tiny little laptop. That's what I recall, but that you can put me right if any of that is wrong.
No, I agree. I think we took full advantage of that free coffee. I think we probably shared one coffee. We were very poor at the time. We were on job seekers allowance. We were jobbing actors, doing bit parts here and there. And I think we just wanted to write something. We wanted to write our own vehicle, our own experience. They say write what you know. So we decided, well, we know about being holiday entertainers. We've done it ourselves. Let's write about it, and we did. And that was how the process began, and I think that's how it flowed. And like you say, we then took that back to when I moved home for a while, and you came to stay with me, and we wrote for a little while while we considered our next options and wanted to become writers for television and film and actors and performers, as so many young people do. And that was how the process started. So then we finished it. Then what happens next, Mike? What did we do once we'd finished writing this in inverted commas masterpiece?
This masterpiece. Well, as I recall, I keep saying that a lot. I had just come off a project with some other writers, actually, over a short film that I made, and you went around for that, actually, Steve. And we had spent some time working with Alamo Productions, the production company behind Goodnight Sweetheart and Birds of a Feather, and that didn't really lead anywhere. And the next project I actually wrote was this with you, and trying to take some of that learnings into it. And as I recall, we sent them a copy, and they got hold of the copy. And I still have that letter in the attic, actually, the letter we received back from them, Steve. I don't know if you remember what it said.
It was a long time ago, but maybe, just maybe for another episode, you'd be happy to dig that out and we could hear the professional feedback for our script, what they thought of
I would
it
be
at
more than
that
happy
time.
to do it. And I'll even take a picture so we can put it on Instagram and share it with people so they can see that one. And ultimately, they didn't want the concept. And Steve, I think that you and I got to a point where we just felt that we had to escape for a little while and get out the way, get out of Blighty. And ultimately, we both ended up taking on jobs with two different holiday companies and going abroad for a little while. And that's how the script ultimately ended up in a box. The box ended up being put into storage. The storage then came. I think I collected, a lot of stuff after I came back and moved to Scotland, and that's how it ended up in an attic.
And that's right. And for those wondering, we went off to be entertainers abroad. It was almost like that scene at the end of Indiana Jones where the Ark of the Covenant gets put into its crate and just stored off into the giant warehouse. I just have a feeling like that's how The Last Resort was stuck in its little box and popped in your attic, as if it would never
That's
be found.
completely how it happened.
Yeah, I can imagine. I imagine Harrison Ford was up there filing it away for you. And
yeah, that's completely how it happened. That is very, very close to the truth. But yeah, it sat there unloved, preserved but unloved until we discovered it in, I think it was December, and I don't know if we ever covered that in terms of how we came up with this idea of sharing this script, which is quite risky because we hadn't read it. We didn't know what was in it. We couldn't remember the story. And then we said, I'll tell you what, let's just make a podcast and share it with other people who probably wouldn't want to listen to it.
Well, that was the big risk, like you say, because when and there's millions of podcasts out there, and we get that, and we love so many of them ourselves, and we're big promoters of the indie podcast scene, and we want everybody to have a voice out there. When you're not just reviewing a movie that a production company's made, or another podcast or something, when you're reviewing your own work, or you're putting yourself out there to that extent, it's quite hard. It's quite worrying. How are people going to react? Is anybody going to listen? And I think we decided very early on, you know what, we're going to do this for the enjoyment of it. We're going to release this. And if we're the only two people that listen to it, then so be it. We'll have it for our memories forever. I'm just really overjoyed that so many of you guys out there have listened and have engaged with us and have become connected to these characters, and that they've come to life in your minds as much as they have in our own. And it's kind of reignited my passion. I don't know if I speak for you as well, Mike, in being creative again, and in writing and in performing, and that's something I didn't know whether would come back, but it really feels like it has. How do you feel about it?
I love some of the words that you use, Steve. You said the enjoyment. I'm the opposite to that. I've been absolutely terrified on every single episode. And when I really thought about why I've been, so scared, I realized it's because I was doing accents. And then to make it even worse, I actually chose the accents to do, which makes it all my own fault. So when I'm getting that horrible feeling in my stomach, knowing that there's a character coming up like Pete the Welshman or Daisy the Geordie, and I know I just can't do it, and it's going to be so cringy and it's going to be horrible, I realized that I made these choices myself and carried on doing it. So there's no excuse. But I've got to say, to have got to 13 core episodes, actually, and to have got through the scripts, I never thought we'd make it that far. I never thought we'd hold enough interest. And to hear people talk about the characters like they're real, and the characters like these situations really happen, is just simply amazing. It really is. And it kind of encourages you to do a little bit more, including that kind of sense of, we can't really leave it there. There has to be something more. But of course, Steve, the original concept, and the reason why we called it Bad Scripts with a question mark, was the intention of just doing this one and then potentially moving on to something else and reading something else. We've written other things as well. But I don't think that, especially those that listen to it, people are ready to move on. And I think we're in that space too. I think we want to explore these characters a little bit more. Now, the question I want to ask back to you is, because I can't remember, but when we were writing this, did we write it with that in mind, that there was going to be something going forward, or did we write it as a one and done?
I don't think it's one and done. And the reason I say that is because we wrote 3 episodes. We could have written this as a sort of movie script and said, this is what we want to tell as a story. But I think we left things open at the end there. Now, I think the Kelly situation with Wayne, the fact that they don't know whether the resort is going to stay open, we didn't close those storylines. I think we left it on a little bit of a cliffhanger there. And, we've taken a little bit of poetic license by adding that post-credit scene, which we didn't have in the original script, I'd like to point out. And I think probably now's as good a time as any, really, for us to sort of officially say, we have started initial discussions, and we can officially confirm that we are writing season 2 of Last Resort.
You just gave me goosebumps there, Steve. And I've got to say, I think Marvel are quaking in their boots over this, and the fact that we're going to be joining their extended universe.
Definitely. I mean, some of those episodes have got quite dark. I mean, they could well be. It could well be that DC come knocking. We will have to wait and see if it's dark enough for that. But let's just hold out hope and see what comes of it. We can go into season 2 and bring to life a whole new raft of episodes with, shall we say, some of these characters and some new characters, because I think the nature of any seasonal job suggests not everybody comes back.
I would like to open this up a little bit to the listeners that care and the listeners that want to be actively involved. And as we go on and make some more specials, I think we're going to be putting some calls out to invite our listeners to suggest character arcs, perhaps even suggest a new character, suggest where they'd like to see some of the characters go. And if it works, I think we'll build it in to the scripts, and it will become quite a nice interaction to have. Even if it's particular lines you think a character would want to say, or a relationship they want to explore, or a bit of background. I would love to see that. And if you've got any ideas, please send it in to us, and we will, I promise you, we will write them into the script and let you know where it will appear and stuff like that. We're appropriate. But it would be remiss of me not to go through. I have some notes from the last episode, and I know you do too, because I listened to it back, and there was a couple of things we missed.
Okay, so let's reflect then on episode 13, script 3, the very end. Let's hear some of Mike's reflections on script 3. Mike, fire away. Tell us what you think.
Are you really going to introduce me like that? I feel all this pressure now that you did it so formally.
I'm going to shine a light in your eyes as we do it.
So here's my first thought. Technically speaking, Hitler punches a nun square in the face.
I think that is a little bit of a leap. So I think you need to explain. I mean, I understand what you're saying there because we've kind of talked about this off air. So just explain where the whole Hitler thing comes from.
So I'll set the scene up. In this particular scene, Kelly's dressed as a nun. It was a nun's outfit, and Wayne had no reservations about Kelly in the nun's outfit. Now, if you remember, Sam is talking to Adam on the dance floor, slow dancing to Mambo number 5. And she, during the course of that conversation, she takes her hat off. Now, she doesn't put that hat back on. A bowler hat, yeah. So she doesn't put the hat back on. Now, what is the one thing that differentiates Hitler from Chaplin? And that's the hat and the cane.
And the occupation of
from
half of the world. From a physical point of view. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, physically, let's not belittle the...
Right, I just want to go. I want to be very clear. If anyone's going, oh, I can't believe he just said Chaplin and Hitler were the same. Right, Chaplin did play Hitler, right, in a film in The Great Dictator. He did do that. He spoofed him. Hitler was a big fan of Chaplin because he loved his films and was completely affronted that Chaplin did it. And as the history goes, Hitler modelled his mustache on Chaplin, which is a very definitive kind of like, you know what it looks like. Now, anyway,
yeah.
As they walked on, Sam is not wearing a hat. I'm guessing she's dyed her hair black because she is blonde in the script, and that's kind of slicked down. So she, in my mind, looks a bit like Hitler, which means if you are looking in to this situation, you didn't know who these characters were and you didn't know it was a fancy dress. What you're ultimately seeing is Hitler punching a nun.
And who's to say whether that really happened or not? Let's talk about what actually happened there. So that was a great observation. I do love the fact that as somebody looking through a window, that would have been one of the most bizarre things you'd have seen all night. And I can imagine if you were drunk walking past the staff bar, you'd have been like, what the hell is going on? That's pretty creepy. But
I would love to see a nun going absolutely mental, though, as Kelly does. She's swearing and shouting. And I'm not sure what style of nun she is because we never really go into it. I'm guessing the whole kind of penguin look, would be in there. No offense to any nuns, both alive and no longer alive, of course.
I mean, you do seem to have a little bit of a nun obsession because obviously you've got your big thing about Sister Act 2 as well. So, I mean, we're not going to dwell on that and your nun obsession. But for me, a nun being punched and going mental isn't the bizarrest sight. I think the nun in the back of a Jeep that's rocking probably was more of an extreme sight that I would see.
Hey, Kelly's
than
just she's just back in the habit. She's just back in the habit. That's all she is.
Oh dear me. That truly was a dad joke of the utmost proportion. We'll move swiftly on from that one.
My second observation is Vlad, and something we never really cover either. That technically speaking, they're saying that Eddie has said that Vlad has broken every single bone in his body, and 3 days later is in an all body cast at the bar, but it's still a fancy dress party, and no one other than Karen seems to batter an eyelid. Do you think it's a joke, or do you think it really happened? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, considering how accident prone he's been, I think we've just taken some poetic license with the recovery and the fact that he's injured and he's in a full body cast. I think we've done it for comedic value, and I think he genuinely has been seriously injured. But he's just so positive in spite of all of the negativity and all of the accidents and everything else. He's still at the bar, still celebrating. It's still no problem. And despite the fact that they're the only words he utters through the whole script, he's like our Groot, going back to the Marvel universe. He says so many things with just those two words.
I don't know. I think it might be a joke on Karen's expense. I think that Eddie and Vlad have conspired here, and they've stuck Vlad in this costume, and then are projecting this idea to Karen that he's broken every bone in his body. Because would he really be upright even after 3 days if that had...
I think you're overthinking that. I think you're thinking too much about the reality of the situation, when actually I think this was a comedy vehicle, because we've seen Vlad get up to so much and then he's disappeared, and then off camera he's had the most tragic of accidents, but it still creates a comic outcome. It's still funny. He's there trying to drink a beer, but with a broken... Karen's more concerned. Everyone else has just accepted that this is what Vlad's like all season. He's been injuring himself, and actually, it's no great surprise that the guy is in a full body cast, because he's just been a complete disaster as a circus performer. Let's talk a little bit about the romantic entanglements then. So we've got a couple of happy relationships that are there. So Dan and Donna, who've been together since script 2. They seem to have really cemented their relationship. It seems quite strong, and Dan's really calmed down his behaviour because of it. Robin and Pete were a surprise union there. Kelly trying it on with Pete, but Pete declaring that actually he had a boyfriend, he was gay, and it was really nice. I thought that those two had found each other, because we hadn't explored much of the relationship side of things for Robin. He was very much a supporting character for the first part of the script, I felt, but this opened him up to a more of a relationship and sort of expanded his character a little bit. What about Adam and Sam then? What are your thoughts there? What do you think about the fact that when we read this back, we'd given them kind of a happy ending?
I'm not. Say, I'm on the fence with this one. I don't think there was enough redemption, and I would say our naive selves try to wrap it up into a nice little conclusion. And so out of character for Sam as well at the same time, with what she says to him of, oh, why didn't you just tell me this originally? We could have saved all this fuss. Well, she, even going back to script 2, she knew he liked her, because it's mentioned and even said to her. And she's also said that she liked him. So it just kind of seemed a little odd that she would suddenly go, oh, well, you should have said something.
But I think she doubted.
I don't know.
I think she doubted it, because if we remember, there's that time when he goes to her chalet, and they have the takeaway food, and she goes and gets into her pajamas, and they chill on the bed, and he just leaves. And I think that was her insinuation. She was inviting a romantic moment, and it didn't happen. So I think she felt that the moment had passed and that maybe he wasn't as interested as people had made out, and that actually that maybe she had overthought it and that he wasn't as interested. So it was a kind of a, were they ever at the right place at the right time together in terms of emotionally ready? Because when Adam was really up for it, we had Craig, her ex-boyfriend of now. She was with Craig. Then they had the split, and she was upset about that. And then, then we have the whole thing with Kelly. So it kind of never really was the right time, or they missed their opportunities. So it felt a little bit like the world conspired against them, but at the same time, neither of them took definitive action to say to the other, I like you. It was always third party. And I think that's where she's going and saying, if you'd have said something, we could have saved all this trouble. What I say is, well, why didn't you say something, Sam?
Yeah, because if we hadn't done that, we wouldn't have had a script to write about, because there would be no dramatic arc in there, would there? So we kind of had to, and we probably fell into that trope of doing the will she, won't she, will he, won't they? That is so common in a lot of shows. If you watch any shows that where they labour there's an attraction, a chemistry between two of the characters, and it's all that they just about do. The first one to do it, Mulder and Scully for sure. If you remember the X-Files, they were always kind of like that, had that kind of that thing where they just never quite connected and the stars never aligned. There's loads of examples of that.
Yeah.
The Office being another one, both American and British, and I think we just fell into the same element. But what I am glad we did is I'm glad that we gave Adam depth, even if it was in a psychotic kind of way.
But I think we addressed that a little bit. I don't think psychotic is really the right word, because especially in this day and age. I think there were anger issues. I think there was frustration that led to those anger issues. And I think, like you say, it brought real depth to that character. But it meant, the world's not perfect. And I think people aren't perfect, and people do silly things, and people will have lapses in judgment all the time. And that just rings truer for people. So I don't know if the listeners feel this way as I do, but, a flawed human, we can all associate ourselves with a little bit. We all feel that kind of sense of that we are all that little bit flawed, and we're all that little bit, have that little bit of imposter syndrome, that we feel that we're kind of blagging it a little bit, and do we really deserve the happiness? So there's almost that element of self-sabotage in there as well. So I think by creating characters that weren't perfect and that try to find redemption, that actually people care more about their outcomes than if somebody is perfectly well behaved all the time and is this perfect character. They're almost a little boring when they're like that.
There was one unexpected outcome to this experiment of ours, though, Steve.
And what's that?
I revealed far more about myself and my comings and goings back then than I ever intended to do. I don't know whether the story just wraps me into it and then I end up revealing something that I think in my mind at that moment in time is relevant. But you'll know this as well. Nothing is pre-planned and nothing's pre-arranged. It's quite organic in terms of how these come out. But I reveal an awful lot about myself through this. And there's people that listen to it that do know me and think, and actually said, I've learned more about you through this podcast than I have done otherwise, because I'm sharing obviously stories, different types of stories. Have you found that, and have you revealed anything that you potentially didn't want to reveal, or was any misses where you thought, I really wish I could have talked about that, but I didn't?
Definitely. I mean, you revealed Sockgate, which I've had lots of people go, Steve, your poor wife, how could you do that? And I thought that was dead and buried. I thought that my abstaining from alcohol for the rest of my life was sufficient punishment enough for that. But apparently, no, we had to drag that all back up again. And my darling wife then did receive some severe elements of sympathy there. And let's not forget, I've also been the butt of a few of these real life jokes with my appearance as a rather premature Power Ranger. There's also mentioned. I mean, to give you credit, your naked star jumps are a real highlight of some of those early episodes. In terms of stuff we haven't discussed, I think an interesting one for me is something to do with the writing of this script, and the time we spent at my mother's house. And I seem to remember on one occasion we were there, and you don't want me to discuss this. You don't want me to tell this story, Mike, because I can see you.
Not everything. You've been waiting, haven't you? You have been holding back. I knew it was going to come out at some point. I just knew it.
I just think that it'll be therapeutic for you to just deliver something. I think people will understand, because I think we can explain the situation. Okay. So Mike and myself, probably at the time we were writing this, had a night out, and we were staying at my mum's house, and we were both sleeping on sofas in the living room, and woke up in the morning, and Mike, you looked at me, and you looked a little worried, and you said, and I'll paraphrase you here because I can't remember the exact words. You went, "Steve, I think I got into bed with your mum last night." And I just sort of shook it off and went, "Mike, I think you were having a little bit of a dream there, a weird fever dream or something. That's definitely not happened. You've been down here with me all night. Don't worry, you're fine." And it wasn't until my mother got up in the morning and sort of cheekily said to you, "You right there, Mike? You care to explain about last night that the reality of the situation came out?"
That's not quite how the reveal came out, actually, Steve. If I can just, you may have just forgot this part, but
absolutely,
your mum didn't say anything the next morning at all. It was completely ignored, and I believed you when you said that to me. And you went, "No, you haven't moved all night," and I went, "Really?" And you went, "Yeah," and I went, "Oh, thank God for that. I don't know why I would have that in my head." And we then met your dear gran and your mum for lunch in a local fish bar or cafe or whatever it is we call it these days. And as the waitress came over, she's putting the plates on the table, and it was your gran that started laughing. And I looked at your gran, and then your mum went, "So, Mikey, did you enjoy getting into bed with me last night?" And your face was an absolute picture. And the waitress's head bolted up and looked at me, and I just I was like the fish. My mouth was just open and closed, but nothing was coming out.
And do you know what was funny there? You turned to me, and words did come out, and you went, "I knew it! I knew it happened! I knew it was real!" And I was like, "I have other questions. What happened? Do you want to explain to everybody out there just exactly how it came to pass that you tried to climb into my mother's bed?"
It requires some explanation. And Linda, if you listen to this, once again, I am deeply sorry. So I had got up, bearing in mind, back then, you only sleep in boxer shorts. It was the thing. And Simpson novelty boxer shorts for that matter. I got up in the middle of the night in a drunken haze. This is not sounding good at all, is it? It's getting even worse.
Let's get to the explanation.
Your bathroom was upstairs, and we were in the living room. So I climbed the stairs and went to the toilet to do my business, as you do. And I think coming out of the bathroom, because your layout was very similar to where I used to live, autopilot kicked in because I'm half asleep. And I must have walked into your mum's bedroom and started getting into the bed. Because all I recall, and this is the only awareness I've got of it all I recall was this whispering behind me going, Mikey, what are you doing? And all I remember saying is, I don't know, I'm confused. And I got up and I left the room and I came downstairs and I got into bed. And then the next morning I woke up and said, Steve, I think I got into bed with your mum last night. You assured me I didn't. And then in the just as we're getting fish and chips, embarrassingly in front of the waitress, it all came out and was revealed. So and as your family couldn't eat, they were laughing that hard at my expense. Well, I just looked. I must have looked. My face must have been beetroot. I must have looked so embarrassed. But that is that story.
You did look like you wanted the world to swallow you up at that moment, and it's understandable. You come out in a drunken haze. You're thinking you're going into your bedroom. You're just on autopilot, but to get into bed with your best mate's mum, I mean, I take your word for it that that's the reality of the situation. But
Listen, Steve,
it's always open to interpretations.
How many articles in Bella magazine or Woman's Own have you read this? Have you seen this appear in Dear Deirdre's? This is not uncommon. This is. I just had the strength to walk away. Okay.
You came to your senses early on. You didn't want to jeopardize our friendship, and I appreciate that, and I think so does my mother too. So, thank you for once again we shared another overshared story.
Excuse me. Don't thank me. You brought it up. I saw it, and there was a little gasp. You may not have heard it when I saw what he was doing, and I was not shaking my head at him down the camera, and then I realised that he's going to say it anyway, and he's going to put it in because he won't edit it out. That is one of those stories, and that happened during the time of writing. But I also remember your mum's hearing was so sensitive that she'd hear us tapping on the keyboard, just writing stuff, and all you'd hear is Steve, Mikey, shh.
This was like 10:30 at night because we were typing downstairs a whole different floor away, but she could hear it that loudly because we can. So yes, that was always a challenge to write the script in almost absolute silence. It's a miracle it ever got made.
That tapping sounds like Adam's toenails just tapping across the laminate,
the
lino floor to get out of a room. The laminate. That's kind of the origins of the script and how it came together. And we, there's probably a sense that it was draft one, and we maybe gave up a bit too quickly on it, and just kind of moved on with our lives, and never really revisited it again until we found it in December and decided to. Well, it started off with let's just have a read through, and that became this idea, didn't it? So
yeah, and regular listeners will know that we live, still 300 miles apart. So that reading of the script together, I guess we wanted to do it for fun, so we could have a little giggle and talk about it. We were going to do it over a Zoom meeting or something. I think that's when it sparked the idea that maybe it'd be worth us recording this and getting it down for posterity. And we sort of toyed with the idea of how we'd do that. And eventually we sort of settled on the format that we came. And, let's record it. Let's talk about it. Let's make a podcast. And we'll stop when we feel like we need to make comment. We'll laugh at our shortcomings. And we'll just genuinely find out if this really was a bad script, or if actually maybe we had something in that germ of an idea that we had way back then. And I guess it's still up for debate, and it's open to our listeners to really decide. So feel free to let us know your opinion on whether you think this was worth pulling out of the vault and listening to and bringing to life. And another question, are you excited for season 2? And in line with what you were talking about, Mike, I'd be really interested to see what people would like to happen. And I think we probably have to set some ground rules here around there's certain things we already know. So we already know that season 2, and I don't know whether this is a little bit of a spoiler, will be set in between summer seasons. So this is going to cover the winter period between the end of the season from Last Resort season 1 and the start of the summer season that will precede it. And without giving too much away, that's where we're going to base the episodes. So if anybody's got an idea for a character they'd like to see, for a situation, as Mike said, we'd love to hear your input. You could be part of our creative design process, and any ideas that we really enjoy, then we will try and incorporate, as long as it's in fitting with the story and with the style that we've written with before. So do feel free on all the social networks to send those in, and we'd love to try and incorporate them where we can. So I think, is there anything else that you want to share, Mike, now as we sort of bring this first special to a close? Is there anything you want to talk about? Any characters or even the way that the story ends that you'd like to talk about?
No, I think we've covered enough for this particular episode. I think in the next special we're gonna, we've got still some more hidden gems around Last Resort, such as the character profiles that we haven't shared yet. We've talked about one character in particular, but we haven't really gone into their profile. So I think for me, I'd like to continue on with that and explore those profiles and then how we portrayed them and whether we portrayed them in the right kind of way. Because again, we never read them. And then I'd like to also talk about MacGuffins going forward as well. Because to use the Raiders of the Lost Ark example that you used, the Ark was the MacGuffin. It didn't really, it was the reason why that story exists. I'd like to understand why Last Resort exists, what the MacGuffin was, and why Season 2 and beyond should exist as well. So I think for the next one, that's definitely some of the things I'm excited to talk about.
And here's another exclusive, because we're all about the exclusives today. We're in conversation with 3 former colleagues of ours who worked in the coat industry to join us in a special episode, which we will record for the very first time with video. So you'll get to see
called a special.
It's a special. It's an extremely special. So you'll get to see us live on camera with our special guests, and we're hopefully going to get to record that in the next couple of weeks. So please stay tuned for that. That should be a lot of fun. We're going to have a lot of conversation about both this script and also the experiences of those guys as coat entertainers, and what it has meant to their lives since, and how it's helped shape their careers with what they're doing now, and just their thoughts on it as an industry. But hopefully everybody should enjoy that little video special, and it'll be good to get a few new anecdotes from some people who were there with us, who might have different views on how things went and might corroborate or dispute some of our findings. So let's see if they recognise any of the characters that are in the script. For anybody we worked with, and we can discuss that all in there. So that should be a real fun and entertaining episode for us to look forward to in a few weeks' time too. So without further ado, then, I guess we wrap up now, Mike. We say thank you once again for everybody for joining us over the last 13 episodes and this 3 specials now. And we hope you join us again next time. Until then,
bye everyone. See you soon.
Bad Scripts was written and performed by Mike Garlia and Steve Jones, a Beach Tide production.